Welcome to WorthingDigital. Thank you for coming. This is the fifth in a series of talks we've been doing this year. We do different subjects each time. I was thinking on the way over here, it's such a nice day, it's a very optimistic day, and I think that's what tonight is like. Tonight is about using technology in optimistic ways. Technology is a tool that can be used for good and for bad, and actually what I love is when it's used for powerful good ends. So we have two great speakers tonight who represent those projects and those feelings perfectly. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Cassie from Codebar in Brighton.
Hi.
And later Kingsley talking about the Good Technology Conference. So I think Cassie, if you want to begin.
Yeah, awesome. So, hi everyone. I'm from Codebar Brighton, in case you hadn't realised. It's quite a big logo. I am Cassie. I'm Cassie. I'm a creative developer. I work in Brighton. I've been doing development for about 2 years now. And actually, when I was starting out, I was working in a pub and teaching myself how to code. And it got a little bit isolating. And I actually found Codebar in London. It's been running there for quite a while, and I started going along just to kind of get a little bit of support. So Codebar is basically where I started my development journey. What is Codebar? So Codebar is a non-profit initiative that I run. That facilitates the growth of a diverse tech community by running regular programming workshops. So basically we throw workshops in Brighton every Tuesday. They are free for anyone that is underrepresented in the tech community. So basically anyone that is not a straight white male. You can't come. We do have a lot of straight white males along though, the majority of whom are coaches. So it's a completely community run thing. All of the coaches that come along are there voluntarily, and it is hosted and sponsored by different companies. Yeah, basically we run workshops. We run a lot of workshops. Huge amount of workshops, tons of workshops, and we eat a lot of pizza as well. This is how we get the developers to come along. Pizza and beer. So these are all the places that Codebar runs at the moment. It started off in London about 4 years ago by a woman called Despo Pantera. She had got her first development job and she was on a development team of 25 people and she was the only woman. So she decided that something needed to be done about that. She started running Codebar, and about 6 months later, Rosa Fox, who was working with Despo, got a job down in Brighton, and she started the Brighton Codebar. It started at Clear Left, which is a wonderful web company run by Jeremy Keith, who's quite well known in the industry. So he was kind of the driving force behind it. He had quite a lot of network, and it's been running for 4 years in Brighton now. The next one to open was Cambridge. And then it's kind of gone a bit mad since then. We've got a New York chapter, we've got a Barcelona chapter, Berlin chapter. It's great. So, why do we need Codebar? We've kind of already covered this. But if you think programmer, I went to Stocksy and searched programmer, and pretty much all of the photos that came up with this. Usually with floating binary and holographic projections. I'm not sure why, but all of them were dudes. And if you talk to people who've never come across code before, who've never done programming, and you ask them what they think about programming, a lot of them think that it's, men are better at it, It's mostly male-centered. A lot of people think you have to be really good at maths, which is not necessarily true. So I think that this dissuades people from getting into the industry. And unfortunately, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that forgets the women that the entire field was built upon. So one of the things that we teach Codebar students right from the beginning, all of the tutorials that people work through on our website all involve historical women who were like the pioneers of programming. So we have Margaret Hamilton, we have Kathy Gillespie, we've got Ada Lovelace, we've got all of these women in the early tutorials. So all the text that they're writing in the HTML will be facts about those women, all of the images are images of them. So they kind of get a little bit of a boost at the same time. And it's something that I didn't know when I got into programming, was the fact that the majority of programming roles in the 60s and 70s were held by women. It was, however, at that time seen as low-skilled clerical work. It was similar to secretarial work. Women were paid less at that time, so they got the majority of the jobs because it was very low-paid, unskilled labour. But from these early jobs, some of these women landed men on the moon. It's just insane amounts of things that they did. And the field started to be held in higher regard, and men started moving into the roles. Unfortunately, they were still being paid quite a small amount of money at that point. So the women that were in the roles at that point had to help them be trained up to go into managerial positions. So a lot of the women got left behind and were actually training up ream after ream of young men to fill the roles above them. There were also clubs that were started to try and help men get jobs, and in order to be part of these clubs you had to have a mathematics degree from a couple of quite prestigious universities, and at that point they didn't accept women onto their courses, so that also pushed quite a lot of women out of the industry. So that was quite a big thing. Oh yeah, this is just a wonderful, wonderful advert that I found when I was looking up stuff. Basically the whole point of this is that working computers is easy enough that you can just have one woman, you can just employ one woman to do it. The other thing that happened in the computing industry was that personal computers started becoming available, and those were quite heavily marketed towards boys and men. And toys, computing toys, were marketed at little boys. So then you get a whole generation of kids that grew up with that mindset. So it's quite depressing, actually. But that's part of the reason that the industry is how it is today. And we get a lot at Codebar of people asking us why women don't want to get into coding, why it's all just men. And it's because of past reasons. It's getting better. It is gradually getting better. But the issues were kind of set in place decades ago, and we're only kind of recovering from them now. And unfortunately, if you want to know more about that, by the way, there's a book called Programmed Inequality by Mary Hicks, which is really interesting. It's about the whole process. She explains much better than I could. But because of all of these reasons, that mindset of women not being good at programming still kind of exists today, and you get pond scum like James Damore. I don't know whether people have heard about this, but he worked for Google. He's thankfully got fired, but he wrote a 10-page diversity memo basically outlining why women are less suited to programming roles than men, and why Google were throwing all of their efforts down the toilet increasing the amount of money that they were spending on diversity. one of the worst things that came out of this was there was an article that I was reading where they interviewed a lot of women at Google after this and talked to them about how it made them feel. And like a resounding thing was the fact that a lot of women thought that, and they knew that it was not true. But a lot of women went to work, and if they stumbled upon a problem, as you do with programming, you stumble upon problems all of the time. You're either feeling like a genius, like you're on top of the world and you can solve everything, or you're feeling like you just should go home and quit. And every time these women felt like they should go home and quit, there was a little voice in the back of their head that went, maybe men are better at this, maybe women aren't as good at this. And to have someone that they worked with publish a memo internally outlining all of that was just horrible. So he got fired, which is great. So yeah, more positively, it's important that we address these problems and fix them because representation matters. It's very important. One of the main things that I've seen recently that shows this off is the Apple Watch. When the Apple Watch came out, the team of people that were working on it to start off with were mostly male, mostly straight white men. And it had a health app as part of it, and they had marketed this as having it tracks everything that you could possibly want to be tracked, all of your health, all of your fitness, your sleeping patterns, your eating habits, everything. And they brought it out, and half of the population went, oh, what about your cycles? What about, are we not tracking that? You said that it was meant to cover everything. I'd quite like to know what's going on with my cycle. And that hadn't crossed their minds at all. And tech is our future, as it says, and men and women should be playing an equal part in it to make sure that everyone is represented and that the tech that we're making includes everyone and helps everyone, benefits everyone. Women represent 41% of the workplace in England, but occupy only 19% of the roles in tech, which is depressing, needs to change. One of the things that I get a lot talking about this to companies that host Codebar is that it's a pipeline problem. I hate that phrase more than anything because it basically takes any argument that you can throw at them and people go, oh, it's just because of the pipeline. It's nothing because we can't do anything. It's the pipeline. The women aren't there. And the women are there. Google, they do a summer of code every year. And the last summer of code they did, 10%, less than 10% of the attendees were women. And they had published a memo, Google loved publishing horrible memos, about how it was a pipeline problem and they had opened up applications and they only got a small amount of women applying. And a group of women who live in Oxford started a women's summer of code as a rebuttal to that, and put together a bunch of courses that were all online. They didn't involve having to go, because having to actually go for 3 months. Hi.
Doesn't mean there. Where are they? Here you are the only one.
Pardon?
You mean the women are there to be hired?
Yes.
But, for example, here, you are the only one.
I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to that. I will get to that. So Women's Summer of Code started up as a rebuttal to that. And they started a 3-month program. Google's Summer of Code is 3 months. You have to go into the Google office. You have to be there. So that immediately, you have to have a certain amount of money in order to do that. And a lot of the people that were going to Google Summer of Code worked for companies already, and the companies were paying for them to get that training. And Women's Summer of Code offered 3 months of online courses that you could take full-time or part-time. They started things like forums where you could kind of chat to people and get like a bit of support. They marketed it through existing networks of women. And they have about 6,000 people signed up for this year. I'm one of them, and all of them are women. So it's not a pipeline problem. It's looking in the right places. So how do we do that? Right there. Making your event more inclusive. Now I've started helping a group in Brighton with this. It's a group that runs a meetup. It's a web meetup. When I started learning how to code, I went along to one of these. I had only delved into HTML, CSS very lightly. I was really interested about the field, but I didn't really know what I was talking about. And I went to one of these meetups. I was the only woman there. Everyone was sitting in little groups talking about really advanced things that I had no idea about. The two talks were both by men who were talking about really high-level things. And I got hit on 4 times that night. And I left 3/4 of the way through the night. I was like, this is not a comfortable environment to be in. And I didn't go back until I made friends personally with the person who ran that meetup. And he reached out to me and said that they want to make their event more inclusive. They want to try and get more people. So we kind of worked on restructuring it a little bit. One of the things we started was they didn't post any pictures on their social media of the attendees. So a lot of women are quite nervous about going along to events. They didn't really know what to expect. So they didn't go along. They didn't have anything on their events about code of conduct or diversity or any of those things. And those things are immediately like little nuggets of information that women will hold on to. And they also all went for a big piss up afterwards, which is great. And I love going for a big piss up, but there's a lot of women who don't quite like the idea of going along to a pub with like 20 other men. So we started doing, well, one of my friends, Narani, started something called Catch a Cuppa in Brighton, and we tried to connect the two of them together. And it was a group of women that went and had cups of tea somewhere or cups of coffee before going along to events like this, so they could go along, chat to each other, kind of get comfortable, and then go along to the event together. That's made a really big difference. I also started suggesting female speakers to them, not just female speakers who come along and talk about the fact that there should be more female speakers, but female speakers who come along and talk about tech. I also do that for the future. And that made a big difference, because when you ask a female speaker to come along, sorry, I haven't done this, but they'll usually bring their friends. Maybe I just don't have friends. They'll usually bring along people. They'll, like, maybe even the next time, there'll be more women that come along. So, yeah, hiring inclusively as well. That's quite a big thing. I hear a lot from a lot of the companies that host Codebar that they want more women to apply for their roles, but they can't get the women to come along for the interviews. They don't get the CVs through. And I think that one of the main things here is actually the difference between men and women when they're looking at a job role. There's been quite a lot of studies on this. But they all kind of average out at men will look to have about 60% of the skills listed on a job role before they apply for it. Women usually 90 or above. Women do not like applying for jobs unless they think that they can absolutely 100% do it. So one of the ways that you can get more women to apply for your job is actually knock out anything that isn't necessary, list the absolute, all the necessary skills. The bit where you're like, oh, this is a bonus and we'd quite like people to have this and that and the other, don't include that, because that is the bit that is knocking out all of the women from your applications, because women will look at that section and they won't apply. This is particularly painful for me because, hi, and shy guys, yes, yeah, but we're not talking about guys right now, but thanks for that. This point is, yeah, it's particularly poignant for me because a company in Brighton posted a job that I quite wanted to go for. There were a lot of things on there that I thought that I couldn't do. And one of the students that I coach regularly at Codebar, whose portfolio, the main piece of his portfolio was a animation from a web animation workshop that I ran. And he applied for the job and he got the job. And I didn't apply for the job because I thought I wasn't skilled enough. So it's a big thing. Also, advertise where women look. There's lots of networks out there. Women are really good at networking. It's the thing that we do really well. So there's a lot of sites, there's a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of meetups that women in tech attend. Advertise in those areas. Also include equal opportunity statements. Some examples. Can we keep questions till the end?
Yes.
That would be good. Just throwing me off a little bit. Also, pay appropriately. It's probably not something that I need to talk to all of you about, maybe? I don't know. That's quite a big thing. Also quite a depressing thing, that the gender pay gap is actually more to do with the devaluation of women's work than actually women being paid less for a specific role. So you wouldn't have two developers on the same team that get paid. One gets paid significantly less than the other. But what happens over a period of time is the more women occupy roles in a specific field, the less the field is held in esteem and the more the pay drops. There's been quite a lot of studies recently on the difference between front-end and back-end development and the fact that a lot more women are going into front-end development and it's getting progressively paid less and less and less. So looking at that is quite a big thing as well. It's all been a bit depressing. So Codebar, what we've achieved so far, we can't change massive societal views on women or deep-rooted systems of inequality, but we can fix the pipeline problem, as I said. So we've had 772 workshops that have been run in the past 4 years, which is a lot. 108 of them have been in Brighton. We've run 62 specialised workshops, so weekend workshops focusing on things like Git, WebGL, CSS animations, that kind of stuff. We've thrown 11 of those in Brighton. Yeah, pipeline problem, my arse. 9,913 students that have signed up for classes. Do you want to know how many of those are in Brighton? It is 16% of that are currently signed up as students to the Codebar Brighton. We have average in Brighton of 30 students a week, every week that come along on Tuesday, 30 of them. There is a waiting list of students that is about 20 every week. We can't accommodate the number of students that we actually want to, partially because of the buildings not being big enough, and also because we try and do at least 2-to-1 student to coach ratio, and we just don't have enough coaches that come to help the students out. So every single week there's about 20 people on the waiting list. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and last year alone in Brighton, we got 8 students into jobs, into junior positions in Brighton, which is amazing. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, how can you get involved? Hosting. This is in Worthing, so, but we get hosted by different businesses around the area, just in case you know a business in Brighton that would want to help. It's also really helpful because the host companies usually look to us for when they get junior roles that open up. sponsoring is something that might be a little bit more doable. We get sponsored sometimes. Sometimes we get hosted by places or companies that don't have the money for sponsorship. So we get sponsored by companies that don't have the available area to host. Sponsorship is about £100 for a session that involves pizza and drinks, usually soft drinks. You can also donate. There is a donate button on the Codebar website that goes towards maintenance of the website and any larger events that we run. Coming along as a student, none of you can come along as a student. I was so hopeful. Coming along as a coach, it's a little bit of a trek from Worthing, but it is good. You get pizza. Also, coming along as a coach is incredibly helpful if you're learning things or if you want to cement things that you already know. I find it incredibly useful to coach at Codebar because I'm still learning. I'm still very early days, and it helps to have to use the right words for stuff and have to explain things in the right way. And sometimes things that I've been doing every day at work, I don't realize that I don't understand what I'm doing until I try and explain it to someone else. And I'm like, I need to go over that a little bit more. Posting jobs on our jobs board, that goes back to what you were asking about where to look for these things. Codebar has a jobs board. So as I said before, we've got about 900 students, just over 900 students that are on our mailing list. If you post a job on our jobs board, we email out that job to 900 students. We also have a Slack channel that's got a lot of people on it. And we have got a Twitter that lots of people watch, so we will post all of the things, get the job out there a little bit more. Starting a Codebar Worthing, it could be a thing. Yeah, that's it. If you want to check out Codebar more, that's the website, that's Twitter, that's my Twitter. Mostly post web animation stuff about feminism. Don't know whether that interests you. But yeah, thank you for having me along.
Do you have any questions?
I was just curious, has anybody ever done a blind study with CVs? Because I know they did this with race, people using foreign names, and the amount of CVs that got rejected just based on the name.
I was reading about that the other day, actually. It was Mohammed and John was a study that they did. They sent out, because obviously Codebar, I focus on the women thing because it's a thing that's quite close to my heart, but Codebar accepts any underrepresented group, and it is just as a bigger problem in other groups. They sent out a CV with the name Mohammed and the name John that was exactly the same qualifications, and I think to the same amount of people. And John got 10 interviews and Mohammed got 4. So that was quite a thing. I know that there's a big thing with Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow did a study on how often things get voted up, comments get voted up, and if someone's got a feminine presenting name, they're less likely to have their feedback or their comments voted up. So yeah, I think it is a thing, unfortunately. But again, it is getting better. People are talking about it and people are aware of it, and that's the thing with like deep-rooted biases. They are unconscious biases, and most people are nice people, and they not everyone wandering around is sexist, but people have unconscious biases. I know, like, even women do. Women have probably more unconscious sexist biases than men because we get brought up with it a lot more. Yeah.
Could you expand on the last point you made about starting a similar
a similar Codebar?
Yes.
So we have on the website, we've got tutorials. The whole website's open source, so if anyone wanted to put a tutorial on there or edit a current tutorial, they could do that. running a Codebar event, it's very much propelled by the people that are running it. Codebar provide the website and the tutorials, but you kind of need to get out there and do a little bit of marketing, get hold of companies in the area. So you need to find companies that are willing to host, companies that are willing to sponsor. Thankfully, when you find companies that are willing to host and sponsor, that provides quite a lot of your developers. Because usually companies look at it as like a kind of way to provide training. And also you get quite a lot of students from companies. A lot of our first-time students are first-time students from the companies that we host Codebar at, because maybe they work in sales or in HR and they think, oh, like that would be interesting. It's good because it provides, we've had a lot of feedback from companies that it provides a really good dynamic, because you have people from different teams that are kind of teaching each other skills, which is great. Yeah, and then I think it's just waiting for the people to come. It's that, like, if you build it, they will come thing. And I've talked at length to Rosa, who was the one that started the Brighton Codebar, and she ran Brighton Codebar for the first 2 years. She said the first year was mostly developers getting together, talking to each other about what they were working on and eating pizza and then going to the pub afterwards. And gradually students started coming along. But she was still struggling to get the student numbers when she left, and now we have like a 20-person waiting list. So I think it's just waiting for the word to get out there.
Some of those in Worthing, I mean, if you've got that sort of membership, all those people queuing, it just seems a huge shame. We have companies over here who are prepared to host such events.
I mean, we've got some venues that we go to.
Exactly.
They're the right size for this kind of.
It seems catch-22. You
Express
can never break out of that circle of it not starting.
Yeah,
So
it would be.
how
it
do
would
we
be
rip it
worth
apart and
going.
make it a straight? You know, make
Do you have a particular profile of the business that you want to go into?
Fresh egg. I mean, where we were last month is perfect.
Yeah, fresh egg. But
good size.
is there any particular industry or anything like that? So is it just going to be the IT industry?
It's usually web development, because Codebar focuses mostly on HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There are tutorials on the website for Ruby, Python, version control, and sometimes we have students coming along who want to learn a specific thing, and we try and match them with a coach. But it mostly focuses on HTML, CSS and JavaScript because it's the most accessible, like easy way to get.
Would you be able to find someone within your group who would spawn it over here if the others
We
here
have,
were there to support it?
Alternatively, we could
Yeah.
put some effort in and see who's signed up to Codebar Brighton, see if any of them are based in West Sussex.
Well,
Paul
Paul
don't
Ledger
need to
comes
put
to
the onus
Codebar
on you
Brighton.
to.
Well, obviously we can't
group
start
for us.
it because we're not qualified to. So
But
Yeah,
I
so
have
sure.
a helpful
We can't see
question.
signed up for Codebar.
What is the bottleneck? What is the hardest to find to start such a workshop?
champion.
Wait, say that again, sorry?
What is the hardest resource to find? A coach, students, a place?
It varies. It really varies. So I've been running Codebar for 2 years now, and there have been months where we have been ripping our hair out trying to get coaches to come along. This was before there was a stage of time where everything was pretty much equal. Like every week we had probably about 6 coaches, probably about 10 students that signed up. So the signing up process was automatic. We were just kind of sailing along, and then kind of before I noticed, the student numbers started going up, and there were a few weeks before we kind of clamped down on it and started manually adding people, where we threw a Codebar event. There was one of them where there were 2 coaches and there were like 24 students, and we were like, we don't know what to do. So we kind of did a presentation and tried to teach them some things like this. So that was a particularly stressful period of time. The problem that we have now, occasionally, because the sun's come out, there's been a few weeks where if you have 20 coaches signed up, guaranteed every single one of those coaches will come along. Maybe like 1 or 2 will drop out. If the sun's out and you have 20 students signed up, sometimes the students don't come along, especially the first timers, because they don't know what they're missing out on. So at the moment, we tend to have more coaches than students on some days. We sometimes have a lot of companies that want to sponsor and not many that want to host. Other times we've had too many that want to host and not enough sponsorship money, so it varies. Hi.
My colleague Dom actually has been a coach in Brighton, and we work in Worthing now. I know that he'd be up for like coaching in Worthing, but our studio's a bit too small to host.
There we
but
go.
If we had someone like this to do it, then we'd be absolutely delighted to.
I think that's the thing, is just like it sounds like you've started the ball rolling. If you start the ball rolling and you start talking to people.
Yeah, there's a network here of people who know each other in the venues, so we're going to have to get it started.
And another thing that's great is that there's a few companies in Brighton. Some of them have a lot of senior devs. They work on quite big projects. They don't really have juniors. Got quite a small team. And then there's other companies that have expanded really quickly and they've got a lot of juniors. And we've got quite good relationships now with some of the companies that kind of help each other out with training, which is great. Yeah.
I think these things grow over time.
Yeah, they do. You have to. But it is effort. It is a lot of effort. I'm not going to lie. I'm exhausted a lot of the time. I do. It's my first ever development job, so I'm working quite hard on that. I'm also freelancing on the side and also run a non-profit on the side. And sometimes, like when I finished work today and I've been, everything was broken for the entire day and I've been ripping my hair out. Sometimes I finish days like that and I go, oh, why am I doing this? I just want to go home and go to sleep. And sometimes I have Tuesdays where I finish work and the last thing I want to do is to go along to Codebar and organise Codebar. But we get feedback from people that is so great. It's so wonderful. And like one of my favourite things coaching at Codebar is actually the real newbie students, the super beginners, the first HTML tutorial, where you have to explain to them what a text editor is, you have to explain to them how a website is made, how all the bits fit together, and they still don't really quite comprehend it. And then you get them to type something into the text editor and then bring it up in the browser, and it's that moment of like, what? I did that. And there's so many people that go, oh, I thought you had to be really good at maths to do coding. And you're like, no, logic, you have to be really good at logic. But it's those little moments, and sometimes people have those little moments where they're working on their own personal project and they get it to work and it's wonderful. Or you get those moments like with the newbies when they manage to change the background colour of something. It's great. Yeah,
Can we say a
I think
big thank you
so.
to Cassie?
Cool. Thank you very much.